Welcome to Cat Lady Learns Online. This video is going to be all about different types of online learning. So in this video, like I mentioned, we're going to be talking about types of online learning. And something I have noticed in my time in education is that when students don't know if they've enrolled in an asynchronous or synchronous or hybrid online class, they oftentimes have a hard time getting started or knowing what to do or knowing how to prepare. It's really important to know what type of class you're registering in. That way you know what supplies you're going to need, if you have to physically be somewhere at any point in time, if you need to be in a Zoom meeting, and how you can get mentally prepared to study and do well in a class. So let's go over the different types of online learning that you might experience at your college or maybe high school or wherever it is that you are taking online classes. So the first one to know about is asynchronous, and this one is probably the most popular form of online classes. And so an asynchronous class is a fully online class. So a student's not going to step foot on ground on a campus. They're going to do everything on a device, whether that's from home or in a lab, a coffee shop. And the other important part to know about asynchronous learning is that there are no live meetings involved, meaning a student does not need to be in a Zoom meeting or in a Google Classroom at a specific date and time to meet with their class and instructor. Instead, the class is held fully online in some sort of a learning management system. And the class is usually organized in something called maybe like a module where there's different sections they're going to go through. Perhaps there's pre-recorded videos or assignments or activities and things that they're going to do to facilitate that learning. Typically, these classes have very structured deadlines and you're going in order, step by step. You're learning and then you're applying that learning in some sort of way where you're being assessed, whether that's taking different types of tests or perhaps turning in papers, doing different activities online. But one thing to note about asynchronous learning is that I think sometimes this is the type of class that gets the bad rap for being online, meaning oftentimes folks will say, well, if you're taking a class online, that just means you do some reading and then you do some stuff and you're not really learning. It's a lot easier. And that is wildly not the case. In fact, that is quite a myth. Asynchronous learning and a class that is designed well, and I do want to highlight that part. So if you have a course that is designed with online teaching fundamentals in place, you will do well in that class if you follow through and you participate and you study and you do things in order based off of how your instructor has set it up. And so asynchronous learning is very much so you on your own, but you have your instructor who has organized the class in a very particular structured way. And you have fellow classmates who happen to also be online doing the same thing. But there are things that you need to do to be successful. And so I have a few things that I wanted to share with you all that I think would help in an asynchronous class. And so the first thing you want to do is to really develop a routine. If you have a class where, let's say, your coursework is due on Friday or it's due on Sunday, what's going to be your routine? How often are you going to log into your class, and how are you going to structure the type of learning that you're going to do? Meaning, if you know you're going to have different activities and reading assignments that are due by, let's just say Sunday, for example, what day of the week are you going to dedicate to do all those things? You're not going to wait till Saturday night or Sunday morning, right? Because that's going to put you in a situation where, let's say the internet goes out, or you have a question and now it's the weekend, or you're finding yourself running out of time, or some surprise thing happened with your family and now you need to go do this other thing you weren't planning on. So, developing that routine so that your week is manageable is really important, which leads to managing your time. This is probably the biggest stress point for an asynchronous class is manage your time well. Really think about how you're going to participate in your class and not wait till the last minute. And pacing yourself is important too. By making that routine and scheduling your week, you can allow yourself to do this in steps and in bites. And a success tip to note is that the more you log into your class, the more successful you're going to be. So logging in on Monday and not again until Friday is probably not a good idea. It's a really good idea to touch point at least every day if you can, if not every other day, because maybe a message came through. Maybe your instructor said something that's really important, maybe the class started working on an assignment and a question came up that the instructor was like, I should probably tell the whole class this. And then boom, you've got this extra information that you didn't know about. So always logging in on a regular basis to create that pace. And setting a schedule. Creating a calendar is a really good idea, or lists, or some sort of schedule that's going to help you. There's a lot of different ones out there, and I share those in my other videos. And so, get yourself a good schedule. And staying connected is very, very important, especially in asynchronous classes where we feel kind of removed, but you're not, right? You're there with other students in the same class, and there's a human being behind the scenes, your instructor, who's there grading and providing feedback and there to help you. So always stay connected in all the means that are there. That means taking advantage of online office hours or sending a message to your fellow classmates. Maybe there's a question, if a discussion board is available, or any kind of like chat application. Now, taking notes in an online class that's asynchronous might seem counterintuitive, but I really stress this as being an important skill set to consider, because when you're learning online and you're watching videos, sometimes there's this tendency to say, well, the information's in my learning management system, I'll just go back and look. That's true. However, when you take notes, whether that's you typing or you physically doing it with your hand, or maybe just doing like a voiceover if that's better for you, use your strengths. But when you take notes, it actually helps your brain process the information. So do make sure you're always taking notes and testing yourself. Use those metacognitive skills and dig deeper and test yourself as you go through asynchronous classes. Asking questions is very important. This is about, that staying connected concept, but ask those questions, especially asynchronous, where you're not going to have an instructor to ask questions to live and in person. Make sure that you're asking those questions through email. And the final thing to note here is always seek your resources. What's available to you? What's available online and what's available on site? Just because you're taking a class online does not mean that you do not have access to what's on campus. There are many resources at all colleges all around the country, so seek what's available to you. Remember, you're still a part of the campus body. You're a part of that population, so take advantage of that. All right, let's move into our next type of course. So synchronous online learning is another type of online course that you could potentially take. And so just like with asynchronous, right? A meaning like not, right? So asynchronous courses fully online. Synchronous courses mean you're going to be fully online again, but what's different is that there are live meetings involved. And so this is where I see students get a little bit tripped up. When you register for your classes at your specific college or university or trade school, wherever you are, if it's a synchronous class, and always look at your class notes to identify this, it will tell you, at least it should, what dates and times you're going to be needing to meet live with your instructor. And so typically a course like this will happen in a learning management system, just like with the asynchronous, but you're going to have certain times you need to be online, and most likely a role would be taken in that situation. So you want to be in attendance. And so, getting your schedule ready and understanding where you need to be, what does the link look like? Is it Zoom? Is it a Google Classroom? Is it a different kind of platform? Looking ahead at a synchronous class to figure out when you're going to meet and where online. And then if you can't figure that out, seeking a little bit of help to make sure you figure that out before day one. So again, the difference is you're going to have live meetings. And just like before, I have some ideas for you to consider in terms of like tips and tricks that you could do. All right, so some things to consider. First of all, you're going to be meeting online, right? So you want to set up a space somewhere at home or an office, wherever you're comfortable, where you're going to be doing those live meetings. Like have a little office area or just like a nook in your room, somewhere where it will be quiet and you won't get any disruptions. The other thing to consider too is that if you're comfortable, and I know there's different situations where maybe it doesn't work out, but try to turn on your camera. Some classes may ask you to do that or require it, but if they don't, I think it's just really good courtesy for the instructor. As someone who's taught in that space before or who's done trainings before, it's really hard to teach to a bunch of black screens. And so when you have the opportunity to see emotion and movement and live faces, it helps the instructor connect with you better, and then it helps you connect too. So when you can, turn on your camera. Setting a schedule is just as important here as it is in the asynchronous environment. This also includes being on time. And so setting the schedule to know, okay, I've got this thing due, I need to do some studying, I need to read, I've organized myself, and I need to be on Zoom at 7 p.m. on Tuesday. What time are you clicking that link? You don't click on it at 7, right? Because what if there's a problem or suddenly the technology that you're using wants to make an update? It never fails. The moment you're going to go into something, it's like, oh, time for an update. So, give yourself that grace and that little bit of time to get online and get situated. And speaking of online, there is something called online etiquette. And so when we're in an online space with others, thinking about things that will eliminate disruption. So turning off your mic is a really good idea until it's your turn to chat. That way, any disruption in the background isn't coming through for the whole class to hear. Making sure if you have your camera on that your background's not too distracting, meaning there's like not a bunch of kids running around. And it's okay if you got kids running around, but maybe situate yourself where maybe it's not seen, right? That kind of thing. I mean, we take online classes because we have lives and we're at home. And so that's not going to be this perfect stale environment, but considering, what this looks like projecting forward. That could also be things like don't have a glass of wine in your Zoom meeting. I have seen this in my class before, and it's always like, well, I mean, more power to you, but just maybe don't put it on the screen. So, things like that to consider. Also, if you have some questions, what's the instructor's policy? Do they want you to raise your hand in the Zoom or whatever kind of platform you're using? Do they want you to put it in the chat? So always make sure you kind of know the landscape, what's expected. Just like with asynchronous, staying connected is important. You want to stay connected with those folks in your class as well as your instructor. Taking those notes for that, using your brain and processing power, very, very important. Make sure you minimize any kind of distractions that might be around. When we're in a live Zoom meeting, it's so tempting to open up other tabs on your computer. I'm guilty as charged. And so make sure that you're in a focused mode. That might be putting your phone away too and that kind of thing. And participate. If the instructor is asking for folks to give feedback or raise your hand or connect, it's so awkward in Zooms or other platforms when it's just like crickets. You're like, okay, can somebody give me an example of this thing we just talked about? And it's like, we're all just staring at each other, or it's a bunch of black boxes. So I encourage you to participate, create that good energy in a class, and it helps you learn to, when you're comfortable, of course. Testing yourself continues to be important, using those metacognitive skills, and of course, keep seeking those resources. They are there for you. It's one of the best skill sets you can adopt. Okay, final platform type of online learning, and that is hybrid. Sometimes it's called partially online, but for the most part, it's usually called hybrid. And hybrid really means a mix of two, right? Two different things. And so in this case, you are taking your classes partially online and partially on site, on campus. This means some of your work is online and some is in person. Sometimes that online work is prepping you for in-person activities. So it's really important that you look at both sides of this coin, so to speak, as equally necessary and important. They support each other and both need the same amount of attention. Your instructor might put the resources in the online space and then you do activities in person, or you might learn in person and the activities are online. It could just be a flip situation. So knowing what that class looks like is very important. And so some skills to consider. First one is that developing of a routine that goes along with the asynchronous thinking. I think that's even more important in a hybrid class because when you are needing to flip between two different settings, you got to have a routine down. On Mondays I go in person and on Wednesdays we're online. So that means Monday at home I need to handle things differently and my commute's different, or maybe you're picking up kids. Maybe Wednesday looks different as a result. So how do you develop that personal life routine as well as the academic side of the house, which goes with managing your time and of course pacing yourself like always. Setting a schedule and planning ahead is so incredibly important in hybrid. If you know in 2 weeks there's maybe a presentation in person, how are you preparing 2 weeks ahead, but also managing any kind of online requirements? Staying connected with your classmates. This might come a little bit easier because you're seeing them in person sometimes, but boy, you could really develop some strong relationships just for future learning in these situations. So, be intentional about that. Continue to take those notes, whether it's online or in person, especially if you needed to take notes at home, maybe in the online space that you need to bring with you to class on the next day. Make sure you bring those with you, right? Like, how are you transporting your information back and forth? Is it on a tablet? Are you doing the physical handwritten notes? Thinking about those logistics are really important. Keep testing yourself, use those metacognitive skills, prepare for your in-person and online classes, preparing for both equally, knowing that they oftentimes connect and talk to each other. And then seeking resources. I'm going to say it every time, and I can't say it enough. And I always share with the classes that I teach that I wish I had been more proactive about that when I was in college. I was the very quiet student who had a lot of imposter syndrome, who just never stepped in the tutoring door or any of the financial aid doors or any of the spaces I really should have been in. And so I can't encourage that enough. You belong wherever it is that you are. You are important. If you're not getting help with one person at a desk, go to another person. And I don't know, I've experienced that too, where I thought, well, the reason I didn't feel like I needed to go in the other place is I had a bad experience, let's say in the library. Okay, well, maybe that was just one person who wasn't trained well or is having a bad day. Go to the next person, right? At the end of the day, the colleges and the universities, the trade schools, the high schools, wherever you are, they're there for you. And so always remember that. You're very important in that situation. So, the different types of online learning that are out there are for you to consider. And what I really encourage you to do is think about what works best for you. What's on your plate? Are you a parent? Are you a caregiver? Are you working 40 plus hours? What makes the most sense? And so when you go to register for your classes at your respective place of learning, make sure that you're reading the class notes and you're truly understanding what the format's going to be. That will help you prepare and that will help you get your schedule straight. All right, best of luck in your online learning classes.